All right. Finally, how do we model care, right? Um, it's a dyadic relationship, but it's certainly more complex than just you and another person. Uh, because oftentimes there are definitely certain aspects of relationships. We can think of care. How can we make care a principle or a basis for a just society, right? Because if it's really going to be the basis of morality, it has to be something that's extendable out beyond simply the immediate situation and the individual relationships, right? Um, the idea, one of the major, uh, not ideals, ideas, but ideals of care ethics is that a caring society is a just society. And for society to be just, it must be caring. Well, in order to best understand how this is the case, we should look towards um, how care can deeply, deeply impact the lives of the people, of the caretakers, the caregivers. Right now, um, Eva Feder Kate, who a very nice woman, great philosopher, she proposed a theory of care as a theory of justice, right? And the model is three part. Right? There's the cared for, the dependent, and she calls it her doula model of care, after the caretaker, caregiver, right? Or what she calls the dependency worker or doula. Because remember, a doula was a house slave, right? One who was primarily tasked with rearing the children, helping to educate and rear the children in ancient Greece and Rome, right? They were often educated individuals who had the misfortune to fall into slavery, right? And that's how they thought of it was thought of back then, right? Now that's the primary dependency relationship. This forms the primary dependency relationship, the relationship between the dependency worker and the dependent or the charge, right? Um, this relationship is defined by the fact that the dependency worker puts a lot of effort into and work into meeting the needs of the dependent. This can be exemplified by a mother or a parent to the child, a teacher to their students, a owner to pet owner to their pet, that sort of thing. Right now, if the dependency worker exerts or infuses or if enough of their energy is geared toward the dependent, right, then this naturally results in them, you know, not having the need, having enough time to look after their own needs. Right, it impacts their ability to look after their own needs, to adequately look after the dependent's needs. Right, um, which results in a secondary dependency relationship between the dependency worker and the caregiver and a provider, right? In order for the dependency worker to be able to meet their own needs so that they can adequately meet the needs of their charge, right? They need to be provided for. Now, this can just mean like a paycheck, right? An appropriate paycheck that they can live off of. Think in terms of teachers, right? Um, the Oklahoma teacher strike of 2016 2017, right? Um, where they made demands to the Oklahoma public educators made demands to for pay increases because they couldn't live off of the salaries that they were being paid, and they were having to take second and sometimes even third jobs in order to meet ends meet themselves, and it was impacting the quality with which they could provide students their own education. Right, that's the case. The teachers in this situation were the dependency workers, the doulas, the students, the charges, and they have a responsibility. They care for their students, and they're trying to meet the demands of their students, right? Their students' needs. But they can't do that based off of what is being provided to them both in the classroom and in their personal lives, or at least they could not do that as effectively as they could otherwise. So they made demands of the state, who determines their paychecks, who determines the resources that are given to the classrooms, right? And the state fulfills the role of the provider, right? Dictating, what portion of the state budget goes towards education, towards resources, things like that, and dictating the raise in salaries amongst teachers. As public educators, they're technically paid by the state, right? They're paid by the school, but the school is given funding to pay them by the state in public education. So they have their own relationship where they are dependent upon the provider to help them meet their needs so they can effectively meet the needs of their charges. If the state or the provider does not care for its citizens appropriately, then you get situations like the Oklahoma teachers crisis. Or, yeah, crisis is a good word. The teacher strike, right? And this is how care becomes a model that is more than just person to person. And it relies on that, remember that concept of intersectionality, right? Where we're not just one individual occupying one sphere at any moment, right? If I'm a teacher, I'm also an employee, right? And if I'm an employee, I'm getting paid. As an adjunct, personally, I get paid kind of shit. So, I need more pay to meet my own needs. That's why I teach at multiple locations, right? It's the only way I can make ends meet on my pay. And I essentially teach a full-time load, the same as like any faculty does, for less than half the pay. Less than a third of the pay, actually, right? It's a very similar situation, right? And it impacts my ability to meet your guys' needs because I have to do other odd jobs and whatnot to make ends meet. Right? So a caring society is one that acknowledges and looks at the concrete problems and looks at the intersectional nature of those problems that is there at those problems and tries to untangle them, right? To care for its citizens as best as possible. Now, naturally, more problems are going to arise anytime you solve one, new problems crop up in its wake. That's why caring is a constant effort. And that's why, according to Eva Feder-Kate, care needs to be at the center of justice, because otherwise you don't actually address any problems adequately.